And continuing our breaking news, the announcement expected momentarily from the White House that we are expanding the U.S. military operations, particularly special forces who are going to be deployed in northern Syria. Joining me here, Senator Angus King of Maine, a member of the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. Let's talk right now, Senator, about whether or not this war is authorized under the U.S. Constitution. We have now been, according to Senator Kaine and others, we've been militarily operating against ISIS for 15 months plus without any war authorization from the Congress of the United States.
I think the short answer to your question is no, it's not authorized. The administration relies upon the so-called authorization for the use of military force, AUMF, that was passed a week after September 11th. It's a very tenuous argument, but the problem here is not with the administration. The president sent up a proposed authorization about 6 months ago to the Congress, and basically it's languished. I think the Congress is doing what it really does well, which is criticize, sit on the sidelines, but not take responsibility.
Why not?
Because they don't want their hands on it. Everybody, you know, Hillary Clinton is still living with a decision she made back at the beginning of the Iraq War politically, and people, as I say, it's a lot easier to criticize than it is to say, yes, this is what we should do. There's also a controversy about it, which is very interesting. The authorization the president sent up was fairly limited in time and in scope, and the Democrats thought it was too broad, and the Republicans thought that it wasn't broad enough. And it was fascinating for me to watch the same people who were complaining about executive authority suddenly saying the president ought to have unlimited authority for troops in any area of the world. And so there's an internal political dynamic.
You're an independent, you caucus with Democrats, but you talk to both sides. You're one of those people in Congress, those senators who talks to Republicans and Democrats. Why can't you, on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committees, why can't you all sit down and write an authorization that has enough support to go to the floor?
Well, I think it got pretty close, as I say, a few months ago, and then it sort of languished and went away. Last night we passed a budget. If we can pass a budget, we ought to be able to do this. I think there is some opportunity, but it's going to take some political will. And as I say, people don't necessarily want to take that vote. But I believe, along with Tim Kaine and Rand Paul, I mean, it's a very interesting coalition of people. I believe that's our responsibility.
What is the implication of having boots on the ground in Syria? Americans can die. We've had one soldier already, one Special Forces operative who lost his life in Iraq in the last 2 weeks.
Well, I think the administration is trying to find a way to solve the gap in its strategy. The strategy was to attack ISIS from the air, which we've done, and also try to bring about some level of indigenous boots on the ground. The train and equip mission failed. Didn't work. Not enough people. It just wasn't successful. This is another alternative. The problem is that if we convert this into a Western war against Islam, that's a gift to ISIS. That's what they want. They want to have our people there. It has to be ultimately local people. The problem is this is complicated by the whole relationship with Assad. Churchill once said Russia is an enigma wrapped up in a riddle inside of a mystery. That describes Syria right now. It is a very complicated situation. And these talks in Vienna are not about ISIS. They're about transitioning and getting Assad out. As long as Assad's in power, I think the strategic mistake the Russians made, they can't prop up Assad and fight ISIS at the same time. Assad and ISIS are evil twins. Assad brought ISIS into being by being so brutal against his mostly Sunni population. We've got to get Assad out and then turn the attention, and here's where we and the Iranians and the Russians have a similar interest, of taking care of ISIS. But I also think you're right. Some indication of military intentions will help in Vienna because it strengthens our hand diplomatically. But those talks in Vienna today are very important. They're early. I don't think there are going to be any breakthroughs. But the fact that the Russians and the Iranians, who are totally supporting, Assad would have been gone 3 years ago without them, that they're at the table voluntarily, and also the regional other countries, to talk about how do we get rid of Assad. As Richard said, you know, it may not be day one, but how do we get Assad out and yet still have a functioning government? Then everybody turns their sights on ISIS, and that's how this is going to be resolved. What the administration has done is a small step, but as you say, I think it's a significant one. These are going to be Americans. There will probably be casualties, as there were last week. Congress ought to authorize it, but we can't turn this into an American ground war.
Senator Angus King, thank you so much. Thanks for being here, sir.